Good morning. Continue our journey in Hamshach Samach Vav. We are on page 28, first top of the first paragraph. After a relatively long explanation and discussion on the different levels of divine consciousness, divine experience, divine pleasure, divine delight that a soul experiences through its journey, one level of Gan Eden to another level of Gan Eden, that with all these great levels, and they go higher and higher, ad Ein Sof, like he said, to the point of ad v'lo ad b'chlal, even, which means paradigm shifts that require a new level of bittul, to divest and strip away an earlier level of comprehension and experience in order to absorb a higher level. It's still all Ein Sof. It's all a reflection of the etzem ha'onig. The onig itself, Eden, is ayin lo rasa, is something that I cannot see, we cannot behold or perceive today. However, the way to access that and the way to draw that, b'mamshich that, is dafka today, through the avodah that we do in this earth. Dafka ba'elam hazeh agashmi, like he says. In this physical world of action, the lowest of worlds, to the Maisa mitzvahs, which God, all the way in his highest source, as we'll talk in a moment, desired, that gives us access to be mamshich the eneg atzmi. And when will it be revealed? That will be revealed la'asilove. So in a sense, all the levels that the soul does experience in Gan Eden is all really a result of our avodah here. However, it's not getting the etzem, it's getting a reflection of the etzem. The mile of that is that it's something we can experience on our terms. Each neshama on its level where it's up to. Whereas this asmizdika level is a far higher and inaccessible level that will ultimately be revealed in the future. La'asad love tchiyas hamesim, as he calls it, elam atchiyah, elam hazeh, like kol Yisrael yeshlam chelik le'elam haba, hamach kolm tzadikim, dafket tzadikim. Why tzadikim? Because tzadikim reflects someone that fulfills God's will. And since the entire nation is kulam tzadikim, thus kol Yisrael yeshlam chelik le'elam haba, to that elam haba we'll have that gili of the etzem ha'onig. Now to explain that, went back to the statement we make in the Chodeidi. It's actually from the prayer. I think the Arizal probably composed it. Now what? Seif ma'aseh b'olah b'machshavat tchilah. Seif ma'aseh b'machshavat tchilah. So literally it means that the end of the creation, the end process, is machshavat tchilah arose in the beginning of his thought. But the Rebbe Rashab, based on the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer and based on the sources that are cited in the footnotes, explains this and dissects it in more detail. When you say machshavat tchilah and seif ma'aseh, what does it exactly mean? So seif ma'aseh is pretty clear. It means ma'aseh, the action, but also the seif ma'aseh, the end product, which means not just the worlds, the higher worlds. It means the final lowest of worlds. Allah machshavat tchilah b'machshavat tchilah. What is machshavat tchilah? So he says mashma from that machshavat itself has two levels: the beginning of a thought and the end of a thought. And he explains that in every process of thinking, you have the beginning of a thought process, and then comes the conclusion of the thought process. Let's say, in this case, I'll just use this example, you're thinking of and planning to buy a house, or build a house, even better, to build a house, a home, for you and your family, and so on. So the beginning of the thought is when you start thinking about it, and olah b'ritzeinei and b'machshava, you begin to think about it. It doesn't mean you think about it all your life. It can come sometime in midlife where a person begins to plan and say, I want to build a home, and begins to envision all the details. Safe machshava would be the end of the process, and now you're ready to actually begin building. Everything is now laid out in your so-called blueprint in your mind. What is that lamaila? Lamaila ola b'machshave u'b'ritzene, k'sha'ola b'ritzene, when God arose in his desire. Now, of course, as I explained, it's only conceptual in time. In other words, it's not there was a time that he didn't, a time that he did. There's two levels. So there's a level where God is now consciously thinking about existence, but it's in his machshava. That's the techilah. The sofa, which would be, he doesn't say it explicitly, would probably be keser. If you're talking about Atzilus, is rotzen, or Atzilus the klolis would be the keser, the rotzen ha'elyon. Then that, the end of the machshava, he says, is zah. Zah is the 7 days of creation, but it's still in his machshava. It's not yet the creation, but he's ready now to create Bri, Yitzir, and Asiyah, as he explained. But all this is machshava. You don't yet have Maisa. The way he put it was very clear. He said, this is called the beginning of machshava, the end of machshava. Omnom, when it says Seif Maisa, all of machshava, techilah, hariyasiyu inyan achem machshava. You now have a plan. Your machshava has a plan, but you don't actually have a created entity yet. Because even, let's take the human example, even after all your thought, you still have to now implement. You have to execute. You have to hire the right people. They have to actually start building. So Maisa, he says, is a whole different reality now. It's a whole new dimension, execution. The Ef Shalem Shasiya Ola b'machshava. Why? Because machshava is not, yes, you want, he says, machshava is actually asiya. Your thought is that there should be an action, but you can't say action itself arose in the thought because there is no action in the thought. It's only the product of the thought of the thought. The thought is thinking about shatiya asiya. And la pirish seif ma'isa ola machshava tchila means that seif ma'isa pel ma'isa ola machshava tchila pirish tchila lefnei machshava. So when we're saying seif ma'isa machshava tchila, you have to say that he's being medayik. You're not just talking about that there should be an asiya, but the actual action. Where is that rooted? It's rooted before you even began to think about it. Because why are you thinking about it? The reason is, in the case of a human being, because you want a home for your family. It's not because you want a home, period. It's not an end in itself. There's something driving you. There's a tremendous tainug that you have from having a home for yourself. A person is not complete without a home for your family. Therefore, tchila, first comes the first step of thought, the beginning of the thought process, then the end of the thought process. But the Maisa itself is rooted higher than even the beginning of the thought process. That's what he says. Tchil lefnei machshava, lefnei reishis hamachshava gamkein. And that in turn is what triggered this should become a rotzen. And a machshava, first the beginning of a thought, then the end of a thought process, and then ultimately the creation itself. But the interesting thing, I'll just add this, we learned this earlier, the interesting thing, the planning is critical. Because you could say, what do we need the whole in-between process? Why didn't just God say, okay, I want Torah and mitzvahs in this world, let me create a world. Why do you need a whole machshava process in the first place? We need it because we are humans. But why does God need it? So first of all, because he wanted it to make sense that we should be able to understand it, like I've explained many times. But there's something more to it. It also allows us to access and relate to that level. If we want to have a relationship with Hashem, then it would be God said, hey, I want existence. Existence came into being. There'd be no interface. There'd be no stepping stones for us to climb. Whereas now that you have this whole Seder Ishtalshus, the beginning of a thought process, the end of a thought process, you have all the levels of Ishtalshus, all the levels of Gan Eden. Now we have what to work with, that there can be a true relationship. Without that, it would be a completely one-way relationship. God created existence. We're doing Torah and mitzvahs, yes, so we cause the tremendous divine pleasure, nachas ruach, as we're going to discuss in a moment, to atzmus. But that would be it. There's no relationship. It's just like servant following what the master wants. The Ishtalshlus says, no, we can have a relationship with God's thought process, the beginning of a thought process, the end of the thought process, the keser, chachma, bina, zah, and all the levels that are part of the whole picture here. So the Giluyim are critical to create a tachtem, to create a structure, because at the end of the day, we are structured human beings. We're rooted, the neshama is rooted all the way in the highest levels, but we needed to manifest in an infrastructure. So what is taka? So what's taka olam? What's driving the ratzon and the machshav in the first place? What is higher than that? So he goes on to say, what's higher than that? Dasiyah b'peil is higher than reishis hamachshava, because the whole existence is in order for there be tzaddikim, in order for there to do Torah and mitzvahs. That's what is the first step, prior to the beginning of the thought process even. Like he says, who did God consult when he wanted to create? Tzaddikim. But there were no tzaddikim, so you have to say he envisioned the pleasure that he would have from the Avedis at tzaddikim in Torah and mitzvahs, and that's what caused the techilas aliyas harotzon for him to create. So he envisioned that there'll be tzaddikim who will come down into bodies and they will do Torah and mitzvahs b'peil mamish. And that's what Seif Maisa Olam Machshava Tchila means. Seif Maisa is now referring to not the end of the action of the creation of existence, but the end of the action of the doing of Torah and mitzvahs in a world of existence. And that's what all. And that's what was made of the Ratzon. That's the techilas hakavana. And just continue the review till the end of the paragraph on page 28. And that's why, now going back to the original point, that's why if you want atzmus hatainug, what he calls hatainug ha'atzmi, that's through mitzvahs b'peil mamish. Yeah, because that fulfills the original intent from the outset, even before he began to create existence. And that's why he created existence. Which fits, of course, with the Maimar Zazal, Bereshis, B'shvil Yisrael, B'shvil HaTorah, that the whole creation is in order for Yisrael and for Torah. And that's what we say, Kiyama Mitzvahs, we say, Amru, Nachas Ruach Lefanai, Shamarti V'nasur Tzeinai. That Chazal say, that this is a Nachas Ruach before for me. Because I've said, and you fulfilled my rotzen, that's Nachas Ruach, that's the Tainug Atzmi, because that's the techilas hakavana, Atzmus HaTainug HaPoshut. Okay. So that concludes a summary of what we learned. In truth, the essential concepts have already been discussed all the way back in the first discourse, in the first mimer, at the bottom of starting at the bottom of page 4, but especially going forward in pages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's where he spoke about it. And that's what began the whole discussion, that's why through our avodah in this world, we draw down a higher the before the tzimtzum, and even a chadash that was unprecedented and never there before, because we're reaching the tainug ha'atzmi. And to understand that's when he brought the whole ayin le'rasa and the whole discussion about Gan Eden. So it all began because of our avodah down below. So really, if you think about it, he's tying it all together now. There was a break of around 10, 12 pages, not a break, but a 10, 12 pages discussion around all the Giluyim to be able to come back to say, and all that is driven by the Aveda down below, Torah Mitzvahs, which reaches the Tainug Atzmi, Eden itself, not just Gan Eden, not just the Nor, the river that flows from Eden, but Eden itself, Tainug Atzmi HaPoshut. Atzmus HaTainug HaPoshut. And yesterday I discussed a little more about Tainug, and we'll see later, Tainug is going to play a very big role as he begins to dissect it later on, a few mamorim from now. But it's going to continue to be a very important theme because it's really reflecting the ultimate source of it all, like the Alter Rebbe and Likutei Torah, the one I just posted yesterday, which we already discussed when we learned the Nayim Beis, as well as Samach Tzedek, Sheresh Mitzvahs Atfilah, which is actually taken from the Likutei Torah, the Maimon Lahavin Masha Kosev Beitzos Chaim. So I posted the actual text where there the Alter Rebbe lays out that the source of it all begins Makra Tainugim, or Ein Sof, it begins all the way in Atzmus, is the techilas, and that's when the shamas are rooted. You can look it up if you want to delve into more of the actual sources and the details around it. But with that, I'll continue now on page 28. But I'm happy to take any questions if anybody wants to ask anything about what we learned yesterday or everything I discussed now. Are there any questions?
I'm not sure. You tell me if this is the avoda and Torah mitzvahs, they're interchangeable, or is Torah mitzvahs and avoda, can avodas halev, not tefillah, but working on your midas, be considered the part of the work that we're doing?
Yeah. Avoda is a very broad term. In general, avoda means all Torah mitzvahs. But Torah mitzvahs is also a broad term. Torah mitzvahs means it's the 613 mitzvahs, obviously, and many of them include what you just said, mitzvah shebelev, tluya shebelev, avos Hashem, yiras Hashem, avos Yisrael, ben adam lechaveri, ben adam lamokim. So pretty much when you say avodah and Torah mitzvahs, you include everything, including personal refinement and development and character refinement, because it's all part. It says that you should vasisa sateva yashar. There's a mitzvah that a person should be kind. What does that mean? The ones that count the mitzvahs explain it really encompasses all menschlichkeit, really. There are cheres and so on. So in the broad sense, Avodah Torah mitzvahs does include everything, really. Specifically, obviously, we'd have to spell it out. Now, there are things, of course, that are Raisa, there are Abanon, Minig Yisrael. There are things that are customs that are also in the spirit of Avodah and Torah mitzvahs. It's not going into those specifics, but overall, it means everything that covers the entire spectrum of human effort to become a better, more refined, and more divine human being.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bottom line, what it does not include is not doing anything. Avodah means simply you came to this world not just to indulge in its pleasures and take care of yourself. You're here to serve. That's really what Avodah means. Ani nevresi l'shamash eskeni, or ani lo nevresi el l'shamash eskeni. So it's essentially a person dedicated and committed and devoted to the cause. And the Torah mitzvahs is the blueprint that God laid out, what I want you to do to fulfill that cause and how to refine yourself, make this world into a dira b'taktenim, into a garden, into a mishkan. And really what the Torah does is to sanctify yourself. Is kadeshtim v'yishim kadeshim to you, and so on. Okay. So we're now the second paragraph on page 28, samachvav.com. You can find the text if you want to follow along. There's a PDF there of this entire volume of Samach Vav. Regardless, as I've said many times, even if you don't have a text, I read the text, I explain it, I translate it, so you can really follow even without actually having a text. So don't feel that you have to follow it.
You said the bottom line is that you're here to serve. What Chassidus is doing, that you're serving with a tainug instead of serving like with a yoke.
First of all, here he's not talking about you having tainug. He's talking here about Hashem having tainug. But yes, the neshamas do have tainug when they travel through all the levels. That's correct. But here he didn't speak about doing Aveda b'simcha or Aveda b'tainug. I just want to emphasize that. Not that it's incorrect what you're saying, but that's not what he emphasizes here. What he's saying here, Chassidus gives you the whole dynamics of how it works. And yeah, okay. Yuvan. It continues now. Based on the above, he's going to go back now to the Maimer. Remember the Zeh HaYom techilas Masecha. This is still a Shabbos Shuvah Maimer, but the previous Maimer began Zeh HaYom techilas Masecha from the prayer of we say in Rosh Hashana's Tefillah. And if you remember, that was the whole Maimer was based, and he explained what that meant, what techilas Masecha was and Zeh HaYom. So if you recall, let me just refresh our memories. He said, what is Zeh HaYom techilas Masecha? So of course it's referring to Rosh Hashana. What's techilas Masecha? So he said that's Gan Eden. Gan Eden is the techilah of Masecha, meaning the kavanah of Gili Elikus, and the tiny we experience of Elikus. But what causes you to have that? He said that's Zeh HaYom. That's Rosh Hashana. Because the whole kavanah of those tainugim and all those levels of Gan Eden are because of the creation of the human being and through the avodah of the human being. He said that very explicitly at the end of the Maimer on page 23. He said, "Ki bechinas gilui de chachma va'enug zeh ma sheneshamis Yisrael mamshichim began Eden ziv terosan va'avedosan." And Gan Eden is a schar for this Torah mitzvahs. So now he's going to go back and now explain it even further based on what we just said. Ola seif ma'aseh b'machshavat chila, and it's interesting in the Chodedi we don't say Ola, we just say seif ma'aseh b'machshavat chila. Here he adds the word Ola, if you noticed, because really that's what it means. Seif ma'aseh b'machshavat chila means Ola arose in machshavat chila. Not whether we learn that machshavat chila is not chilas hamachshava. It means preceding machshava, machshavat chila. So with that, he's going to now explain this Rosh Hashana prayer. What we say Rosh Hashana, this day is the beginning of your masecha, your actions, your creation. So you see the words right away. Techilah, you see the word maisa. So right away, you see the parallel to Seif Maisa Machshavat Techilah. He's going to explain. The Lecheda, but here's the obvious question. We know the creation didn't happen on Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana was the 6th day of creation. Adam was created on Friday, the 6th day. The creation began on Sunday. Yom Echad, Yom Rishon. It was a Sunday. Sunday was the 25th of El, according to that. Then 26th of El, 6 days, Rosh Hashana, the 1st of Tichleh. So why do we say V'lama Nik Rosh Hashana techilas masecha? So why is Rosh Hashana called techilas masecha? Acha Inyan, the beginning of creation. The Inyan is because it's not talking about the actual creation process. He's talking about the kavanah of the creation. The techilas masecha pirish tachlis hakavana. When you say techilas masecha, you're not talking about the actual taking a hammer and knocking in a nail, or taking bricks and putting up a building. Obviously, in our case, God creating light on day 1, Rukiya on day 2. We're not talking about the actual creation. We're talking about the kavanah, the inner purpose of the creation. Zeh nikra techilas masecha. That's really what we say is techilas masecha. U'kamei seif ma'aseh she'olav machshavat chila kanal. Like when we say seif ma'aseh is the end of the process of the creation of ma'aseh. Where is it arose in machshavat chila? We're not talking about the beginning of the thought of creating existence. We're talking about the beginning of the whole process that caused you to initially even want to create existence. V'zeu b'Rosh Hashana dafke. And when is that? That's on Rosh Hashana. That's not on the Sunday, Chafayel. Shehu yem brei Adam Harishon. Because that's when God actually created Adam Harishon, who would be the one that would implement this kavanah, which is Torah mitzvahs. The osh shayach kiyuma mitzvahs b'pel mamash. Because that's when the first time you have the ability, that's when it's possible to do actual mitzvahs. As beautiful as the world is, in the first 6 days before creation of man, of the human being, it's not the kavanah of Torah mitzvahs. When is that? That is after when a person oz nishlam hakavana masha ola tchila b'bchinas atzmos ein sof. That's when the kavanah is fulfilled, that arose in atzmos ein sof before Bereshis bara, before the first day of creation, before the beginning, even before beginning of thought process, beginning of the thought and the ratzon process of creation. U'lechein nikra techilas masecha, and that's why it's called techilas masecha. Not just a technical term that on this day is the beginning of when creation started. No, it's the beginning of the whole intention of creation. The Yisavas Shekedim ain't a techilas masecha adayin. The Yisavas Shekedim, the creation itself that preceded the creation of man and the purpose, you can't call techilas masecha really. Why can't you call techilas masecha? Because it's not really, that's not where it began. It didn't begin on the first day of creation. It began when God desired to have Torah mitzvahs. The beginning of creation, that still relates to the beginning and end of the thought process. That, yes, It's part of the plan. The blueprint of existence, that's where the creation fits in. The kol ha'olam lo nivra el letzavos lezeh. And the whole purpose of this world is letzavos lezeh, is to command this person in order to do mitzvahs. Bring another Maimar Chazal that tells us. So here clearly, kol ha'olam lo nivra, the entire world was not created, only letzavos lezeh. That is in the Gemara and Brachos, yeah. Like Bereshit is b'shvil Yisrael, b'shvil HaTorah, the same idea. But techilas masecha, now we mean techilas masecha, not the beginning of the action, but the beginning of the whole intention. That's higher than even the reishis hamachshava, the first part of the thought, the beginning of the thought. Zeu b'kiyam hamitzvos dafka. That is specifically in the performance of mitzvahs. V'zeh shayach dafka k'shenivra adam harishon. And that's only possible once the human was created. U'lechein nikra yom hazeh, the Rosh Hashana techilas masecha. That's why zeh hayom. That's why Rosh Hashana is called techilas masecha. So you think about it, it really gives a whole different meaning. It's not just a technical thing. On Rosh Hashana, we remember the first day of when the building went up. No, it's not the first day when the building went up. The first day reminds us, Rosh Hashana reminds us of what the purpose of the building is. And that changes the whole picture, because that's why we're celebrating Rosh Hashana, to renew our contract and our commitment to God to fulfill the purpose of existence. So in simple Chassidus applied language, you can ask yourself the question, many people live in this, most people we all live in this world, and we're busy functioning, surviving, and doing whatever we think we need to do to succeed, whatever that means. But this immediately tells us that's not the way a person should live. A person should be thinking one thing: why are you here? Not to try to make the best of the existence that you're in. Why is existence here in the first place? Why are you here in the first place? We're not just here to enjoy the ride and just to make it, to get by. We're here to fulfill a purpose. And that's where the Tainug Atzmi and Tainug Poshet, what he calls the Atzmus Tainug HaPoshet, manifests. When you're doing that, when a person's not living up, God forbid, to their purpose, the whole existence is only a means to that purpose. Just in simple Balbatisha terms. Okay, that covers that paragraph, page 28. Any questions? All clear? Good. So let's continue. Ubira Inyanhu. So now the Rebbe Rashab is going, the plot thickens, basically. He's now going to go deeper into this topic. And keep in mind that now he's going to, discussed earlier, remember, talked about Gvul and Bli Gvul. That our existence is primarily an existence of finite proportions, finite parameters, I should say. And as human beings, we're mortals, we're finite, and we are able to climb as a finite creature can. But God gave us the ability to go higher than just the finite, because we have a soul. A soul is a divine soul, so we have the ability to also experience the Bli Gvul. And what is Bli Gvul experienced as? Like we spoke about, the soul's journey, both in this world and even in the world, even in Gan Eden, I should say, all the levels, Ad Ein Sof. So that's not just Ad Va'ad B'chlal, but also Ad V'lo Yad B'chlal. And that's what we achieve. Of course, doing Torah and mitzvahs in this world helps propel us in that regard. And that's why Neshama has that energy. So besides the Neshama, its own yearning and longing to climb and connect to its source, with Torah and mitzvahs gives it instruments and tools to do so. Like I just mentioned, what is avoid at the end of the day? That we're not just selfish, survival-driven creatures, like everything else in the world is here to survive and to function, and that's that. We are transcendent creatures. We have a soul. We have a purpose. Animals in the wild, or not in the wild, nature, whether it's doimim, tzemeach, or chai, whether it's mineral or vegetation or animal, Their role is part of Masecha. That's creation. That's the stage where you make a dira b'tachtenim. But who makes the dira b'tachtenim? That's the human being. The human being goes out of his nature. Because if we were just following our nature, we would do the same thing. You're born, you eat, you drink, you sleep, you take care of your needs, you breed, take care of your young, and that's that. You hunt, etc. But we have the mission of transforming this world into a dira b'tachtenim. So right away, there's a transcendent bli gvul element to that. That's more than just the gvul of existence. The question, but here we're adding something more. That would be giluyim. But we go even further. We can reach the etzem, because the etzem, all this was desired by Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu and Atzmus, where he wants us to do these Torah mitzvahs. So in addition to the bli gvul and giluyim, we also get now more than just bli gvul. We get etzem itself, which is even higher than bli gvul, as we'll learn later. But the point is that all this is only possible by a person, a human being who was given the power to do so. And that's our avodah. So now we're going to go deeper into a discussion of what mitzvahs are exactly in contrast to existence. Because existence on its own is also a divine creation. Remember, everything in existence God put into this world. And it's a wondrous creation. It's with tremendous design and wisdom, and really in many ways, layers and layers of being able to discover godliness in everything that exists. So what really does a mitzvah add that we cannot find through our natural journey, our natural search? In other words, God forbid, if we didn't have Torah and mitzvahs, can a human being actually, through their own intelligence and emotions and journey and search and soul, how far could they reach? So there's no question we can reach places, but the question is, to what extent? And he's going to now dissect this a bit more, comparing the structure of existence to Torah to mitzvahs. That's what he's going to be discussing in the next few pages. And so with that, let's read inside. Obira inyanhu. And the explanation of this inyan is as follows. The Ineksiv, he introduces now a new pasuk, another pasuk that he did not bring till now. It says in Tehillim, I see Kuf Yutes Tzadik Vav, L'chol tichleh re'isi ketz. That's what the verse says. It's Tehillim Kuf Yutes Tzadik Vav 119:96. The long chapter, the very long chapter in Tehillim, the longest chapter. So he says, L'chol tichleh re'isi ketz. Now what does tichleh mean? Literally this means, to every purpose, there's an end. To everything, but we're going to see now, he's going to bring at least, if I recall correctly, 3 or maybe even 4 commentaries. What does the chol tichleh re'isi ketz mean? And the end of the pasuk, you'll see now a contrast. Rechava mitzvasecha ma'od. So everything has an end. We'll soon see what tichleh means. But your mitzvahs are very expansive. Chava mitzvasecha ma'od. Your mitzvahs are very expansive, meaning it does not have an end. Tichleh has a ketz as an end. It means it has a limit, a finite limit, which is very consistent to what we've been learning till now. Remember, we learned about ad. The word ad means atkan, the second interpretation. And then he talked about gvul and bli gvul. So here you see in this pasuk, you see two phenomena, if you wish, 2 states. One has an end, and one is very expansive. We'll soon learn that is bli gvul. Upirish Rashi. So immediately, let's go. What does this mean? Rashi says, "L'chol siyum davar yesh ketz v'gvul." That's what Rashi says. Every siyum davar, to the end of any entity, has a ketz v'gvul, has a boundary and a limit. So mafarish tichleh hu siyum. Rashi is saying tichleh is like the word siyum, the end of something. The ain't moving kolkah. The Rebbe Rashab asks, it's not that understood. What is Rashi saying exactly? This pirush of Rashi doesn't seem to, is not really fully understood. Why? Then basically it's saying l'kol ketz yesh ketz, or l'chol ketz re'isi ketz. Tichleh means ketz. That's what ketz is. Ketz means an end, a boundary, and tichleh means a siyum, an end. So what's the pasuk saying? That every end has an end, every boundary has a boundary, every limit has a limit. So what is the meaning when you say siyum davar? V'zeu davar echad mamish. It's one thing. Now he says eina moving kol kar, meaning you could b'deichik, you could force it and explain what it may mean, but on the obvious level, it seems a redundant word, according to Rashi's commentary. Umal l'chol tichleh de'isi ketz. What is the pasuk coming to tell us? Even if you were to say tichleh and ketz have a little difference, but what is the pasuk coming to say? That an end has an end? That everything finite has an end, has a boundary? What's really the punchline here? So now he's going to bring another interpretation from the Gemara. But Gemara Eruvin, the Gemara in Eruvin, Daf Chaf Aleph Seif Amud Aleph. So there in page 21 at the end of the first page, Daf Chaf Aleph Seif Amud Aleph, Pirush Rashi, also Rashi. Rashi there gives a different interpretation. L'chol tichleh de'isi ketz. There Rashi writes as follows: on the l'chol tichleh de'isi ketz, the seif kol davar yesh ketz limtzei seifei. That at the end of the day, everything that exists has an end to find its ending. In other words, that everything has a limit where you can ultimately find that everything is finite, basically. So basically, the pasuk is saying that the tichleh here means everything in existence has a finite ending, it's a finite boundary, but mitzvah are very expansive. Ve'ein ketz letichleh shalah, at kan l'shenei. That's the language of Rashi, and that there's no end to the tichleh, to the purpose, to the existence of a mitzvah. So l'chol tichleh is referring to everything in existence has a boundary except mitzvahs. Mitzvahs has no end. Now, what the word tichleh here would mean, seif kol davar, gol davar. So this you could say maybe is what Rashi means on the pasuk as well. That when he writes the chol siyum davar yesh ketz, based on the Rashi and Eruvin, maybe that's what he means. But at least now we have a little more explanation. The pasuk is coming to say that everything in existence. So when he says siyum davar, he means everything in existence that's finite has an end, whereas mitzvahs don't. That's what the Gemara and Eruvin, the Rashi and Eruvin comes to add. Now the Rebbe Rashab continues. And based on this, you can say the meaning, the interpretation of this verse then is as follows. The Pirush of tichleh, hainu al derech moshel seifa elam. That the meaning of tichleh now is like the end of the world, seifa elam, like the boundary, wherever the final boundary is of existence. The yichelim limtzei, kitzei v'seifei. And in everything that exists, you can find its boundary or its end, its edges, if you wish. Which is correct about the finite existence. Everything you can ultimately find where it ends. There's a point where it ends. You could have the biggest thing in existence. The Pacific Ocean is a very large ocean, but it has an end, ultimately. The solar system, the many solar systems, all the universes out there, they all have an end. Sha'af she'emed be'emtza elam. So even though you're not at that edge is also a good word, it has an edge. Even though you're standing, let's say, in the middle of the earth, or middle of a certain particular location, you're not at its edge. That's just a matter of where you're standing, your vantage point. But you could find the end or the edge of that existence, wherever you may be, whatever exists in this world. Now he continues with more commentaries. The Kodev Lezeh, similar to this, close to this, Pirush HaMetzudas David. The Metzudas David is another commentary, classic commentary in Nach and Tilim. Shekosav v'zel shene. He's actually quoting the Metzudas David, and this is the language of the Metzudas David, actually quoting, citing his language. L'chol davar asher yesh lehem tichleh. Everything that has a purpose, Most likely means a purpose here, meaning anything that has a defined entity. I could imagine with my mind, I see its ending, meaning everything that exists, I can imagine its end. That's how he interprets it. In the footnote 41, they bring that the Eira Teira of the Samach Tzedek, he explains the Metzudas David by adding this line. He says, "V'im kein hamachuven shera ketz kedim cheyese bepeil." So the intention here is by saying that you see the end, even if you don't get there in actuality, you can imagine an end. So everything that exists has, even if you don't see its edge or its boundary, you can imagine it. That's what the Metzudas David is, the way he phrases it. So it's karev to similar in concept what we've been saying till now from Rashi in Erev and also the Rashi in Tehillim. Now one more commentary. I said 4. I think there's actually 5 commentaries that he's going to say. He's going to bring now the Even Ezra. I know this is not so common, but this is in Samach Tzedek is very common to find where he'll bring all the commentaries on a particular verse. Rebbe Rashab is doing this here, most likely because this is such a fundamental verse, especially in the context of what he's going to explain. So he really wants to cover it very thoroughly. And this is, after all, a hemshech Samach Vav. It's not one mimer. One mimer, usually you don't find such a thorough and breakdown of every possible commentary, all the meticulous breakdown. But the Rebbe Rashab is doing that here. So now he brings the commentary of the Even Ezra. Rab Even Ezra, or his name was Rab what was his full name? His name was anyway. The Even Ezra is another classic commentary you find on Chumash and on Tehillim and so on. He writes, "The whole tichleh."
Rabbi Avraham ibn Ezra.
Right, that's it. Rabbi Avram ibn Ezra. That's Rabbi Avram ibn Ezra. We call him the Even Ezra, but it's Rabbi Avram ibn Ezra. A very unique and interesting commentator, very different than most commentaries. So he says like this: L'chol tichleh. The pasuk says L'chol tichleh. Ketz b'l'shenenu pam reish pam seif. That when we say ketz, an end. When you say ketz, like Vahimi ketz, and the end, what is an end? Is it the beginning or the end? So he says sometimes it refers to the ketz. When something begins, you can call it also an edge. One edge and another edge. You take any object, for example, this sefer. There's the beginning of it, there's the end of it. Both, the Rebbe Nezra is saying, when you say the word ketz, so when he says the chol tichleh isi ketz, ketz can mean, sometimes it means in our language, pam reish, pam seif. Sometimes it means the head, sometimes it means the sof. Say ketz haguf, the edge of the body. Are you talking about the bottom of your toes, the bottom of the sole, or are you talking about the head on top of? So the ketz can mean most, like the bookends. That's what ketz is. Pam reish, pam seif. Kamoy al shnei kitzveisov. Like it says on both ends. So they're clearly both ends.
Shnei kitzaisov.
It's not kitzveisov. It's
No.
Ktsesov.
In
Okay.
Parshas Tetzavi, I think. Al shnei
But don't we say ktsoves when we say? Don't we say ktsoves when kuf tzadik vov sof? We say ktsoves, no? Shnei ktsoves.
Yeah. But that's what it says. Al shnei kitzaisov.
Okay, but here's with one vav. Okay, ktesov. So this is a pasuk in Parsha Truma. We talks about, I believe it's about the Odin, right? On both edges.
I think it's about the ephod. The ephod of the Kohen.
It's on the ephod. Okay. I thought it was on the Odin. Fine. But bottom line, you see from that Even Ezra brings a raya that the word ketz can be used on both edges. It means both edges, both ends, as you say. We say both ends. That's the Even Ezra's taich. So the whole tichleh, so every tichleh has a beginning and an end, basically, is what he's saying. Says the Rebbe Rashab, to explain it. Ulepirushe Yuvan, and according to the Even Ezra, it's understood the ima is the tichleh hainu ketz. So now going back to his initial question on Rashi, tichleh is synonymous with ketz. So he's saying like this. Even though tichleh means ketz, like he said, a tichleh, like Rashi called it before a siyum, that means an end. Omna ma'achad ha'reish nikra gam ken ketz. So tichleh, however, is only the siyum, according to Rashi. It's only the end. But since the reish is also called an edge, an end, not just the end, not just the bottom is called the end, but also not just the end is called the end, but also the beginning is called the end. That's what the pasuk is coming to tell us. That every beginning, that every end has a beginning. It's saying kol dovish yesh techilas hainu haschola yesh ketz v'seif. Or the other way around. That everything that has a beginning, haschola, meaning haschola, yesh ketz v'seif, has also an end. That's one way to say it. But I started saying it, he says, lemer, pirush, but it's even better to interpret it according to the Even Ezra like this, the other way around, that everything that has an end has a beginning. L'chol tichleh dover sheyesh leseif, since tichleh means safe, end, the isi ketz hainu haschola. So I see, and I envision also a beginning, ktsei hadishim, the first end, meaning the first beginning, the first edge. So first he says simply, every end, every beginning has an end, but really if you read the pasuk properly, l'chol tichleh means every end has a beginning. The tichleh lashon safe, because tichleh means safe, an end. The ketz hu haschala, and ketz can also means a beginning. U'kamei lamayla aden ketz u'lamata aden tachlis, like the Zayar, the Tikkun Zayar Chadash that says that lamayla aden ketz, ein ketz means no end. Ulamata aden tachlis. What's the difference in ketz and tachlis? So he's interpreting tachlis means a beginning. Tachlis means an end. And Lamaila aden ketz means a beginning, doesn't have a beginning. Lamaila aden ketz has no beginning. Ain't it techilas like? And Lamata aden tachlis means that below, and it has no end. So now tichleh and ketz are essentially two different meanings. One is the beginning, one is the end, and one is the beginning. So now when you look at all the commentaries, you come away with a much clearer understanding. And this is most likely how he's interpreting what Rashi is saying. Even though Rashi on its own is not clear, because it seems like it's just synonymous, but now with the Even Ezra, and with the Metzudas David, and the Rashi and Eruvin, we come away that no, it means that every end has a beginning. Uba Gemara Nida, one more interpretation, in the Gemara Nida, Daf Nun Ches Amid Beis. In the Nida and page 58b, he says, L'dvarai ein ketz, u'l'dvarai chaveri ein sof. So he says, my words, there's no end, or say no beginning. U'l'divrei chaveri ein sof, there's no also. So what's the difference between ketz and sof? He's using two terms. Gamkin apirish ketz haschola. So to my words, he's saying there's no beginning. And to my friend's words, there's no end. He tells us to look in the Marsha. So here again, by saying ketz and seif, tells you immediately that it's not redundant. Ketz means no beginning, and sof means no end. So sof would be like tichleh, the whole tichleh. So that's the analysis of the first half of this pasuk, which is the whole tichleh to isi ketz. Bottom line is that everything has a beginning and an end. Every beginning has an end. Every end has a beginning, as he just explained. So this is somewhat of a breakdown in detail, a real dissecting of a pasuk. Now the Rebbe Rashab is going to take this and apply this to Seder Shtalshlus, to what we're discussing here. So he says the following. So I'm going to read a few lines here, and then I'll stop for questions. Lufi perusham yesh leimer. And according to this interpretation, Really means all of them combined. The chol tichleh ketz, that the chol tichleh ketz is referring to, and here you see the addition of chassidus. Koi ala giluyim de seder ishtalshlus. It's referring to, it's discussing the giluyim of the cosmic order. Shehem b'bchinas midah v'gvul. They have a measure and parameters and gvul and a boundary. They're all finite. The giluyim de seder ishtalshlus arehem b'bchinas hislapshus eres b'kelim. All the giluyim, all the revelations, and all the expressions and experiences of the cosmic order, he's talking about the whole Seder Shtalshlus, is all in the form of Islapshus of Eris in Kalim. Like just like in a human body, Eris would be the energy, let's say the power of vision, the Kali would be the eye, the power of hearing in the ear. So Seder Shtalshlus, which is, of course, a macrocosmic infrastructure, everything is Eres B'Kelim. That right away tells you it's Midah and Gvul. Eir and a Keli. Eir HaChochmeh and the clay of Chochmeh. Eir HaBina and the Keli of Bina. Atzilus, made up of 10 spheres. Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, all the entire structure. V'Kelim harihem vade b'bchinas Gvul. Kelim are certainly a state of Gvul, of finite containment. That's what a Keli is. It creates parameters. They are defined and limited in their very core personality and existence, both their personality, meaning their function, and their form. You could say Mahus is like function and Mitzias is like form. It's one way to interpret it. Like the container of Chachmeh, the container of Chesed. Next page, 29. And they're also gvul in how they extend themselves. So firstly, they themselves, their form and function are finite and defined, and also the way they express themselves. There's a limit of how Chachmeh flows. There's a limit of how Chesed flows. So that's all gvul. I'm going to stop here because he's now going to go into more detail understanding what that means. But bottom line is, so then what we just learned about the chol tichleh, the isi ketz, you can say, it says, he applies that to the whole Seder Shtalshlus. Everything in existence has a beginning and an end. The chol tichleh isi ketz. Every end has a beginning. And like he said, every beginning has an end. Bottom line, everything is structured. But mitzvah secha, we're going to soon learn, chava mitzvah secha ma'od, mitzvahs are a different category. They have an expansiveness to them that we're going to learn is not gvul, is bli gvul. But we're not there yet. That's not. He's going to come back to that in a while from now. I believe, where would that be? Well, we'll soon get to that. But now he's going to go into a deeper analysis of Atzilus, of first the Kalim, and then the Eiris of Atzilus, because you could say maybe the Kalim are Gvul, but who said the Eiris are Gvul? But he's going to go now into more detail about that, and we're going to discuss it. But I want to stop, because I did read here a while, and I want to get if anybody wants to ask any questions. I think it's pretty straightforward, actually, but still.
I mean, there's one statement that's, I mean, I think he's probably going to say, I haven't looked forward, but that hasn't been said, that everything has a beginning and an end except for the Eibishter.
Well, he just said even mitzvah secher, chava mitzvah secher ma'od. That's the end of the pasuk.
Well, but okay, I thought
the contrast that mitzvah secher. The chol tichleh ketz is in existence. We're not talking about the Eibishter. We're not talking about Torah and mitzvahs now.
But okay. Let me ask the question. I thought we previously just talked about Gan Eden a lot, and we talked about how there's infinite levels of aliyah to become essentially closer to God. But you can't get to it. The ad the sorry, I don't know the ad or the whole. You know what I mean? Ad the ad and ad velo ad. So mitzvahs give you a schar that enable you to continue elevations ad velo ad, but you don't reach the ad. You don't reach atzmus. So
that's incorrect. He just said that Torah mitzvahs is the only thing that reaches tainuga atzmi aposhet.
So he's saying everything, even the schar of a mitzvah has an end, meaning you can actually reach atzmus, the sofosho davar, at the end of the day. Is that what he's saying?
No, we're not talking about atzmus now. We're talking about everything in existence has parameters.
Well, that's, I mean, I understand that law of physics, so to speak.
We're not talking about mitzvahs. The second half of the pasuk talks that mitzvahs don't have parameters.
Right, right. And
what's your question?
Nothing. I think that I understand it better now that you've kind of fleshed it out.
Okay.
I think, yeah, he's saying everything has an end except for Elikus, essentially.
He didn't say the Elikus. He didn't say that. He said the pasuk says mitzvah secha, rechava mitzvah secha moed. If you want to go further, we're going to learn about it later.
Well, I understand, but I'm assuming the shaykhus is that the mitzvah binds you to the infinite.
So you're speculating what he's going to say. We're going to learn about it inside. He's right now said the first half of the verse. L'chol tichleh isi ketz. And he gave 5 different commentaries and says this goes on Seder Shtalshlus, that everything has a midah v'gvul, measure, and even Atzilus now, Eris and Kalim. That's what we're learning right now. We're going to get back to the mitzvah secha. We're not talking about mitzvahs now.
Okay,
just
thank you.
Patient, and you'll see
yeah, loud and clear. Thank you. Oh, whenever there's no other questions, I need to mention something administratively.
1 second. Let me ask. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Anybody has any other questions? Okay. So fine, go ahead.
Yeah, there's someone in the class. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. You have the Galaxy S20 FESE, and I saw you text chatted me that you want to be added to the WhatsApp group. I'm sorry I did not see your request yesterday. I don't check the chat all the time, but I did today. And if you could please text me your name, obviously your phone number will come when you text me, but I need your name and phone number. I don't have it, so I can't add you without your phone number. Anyways, you have my number now. It's in the chat. Whatever, 650-208-8186. I don't care. The rest of the world, you want to go on the WhatsApp, feel free to text me. And hopefully, yeah, that's it.
Rabbi Yitzchak, also a request from you, if you could put the Zoom, because now we have so much writing after every shiur.
Yes.
It's hard to get the Zoom.
I got it. Just and by the way, I will do that, Blineder. I will try to continue doing that.
And a more practical solution, Rab Shlomo, is simply to copy the Zoom link. It's always the same. Copy it to your computer, and you'll have it always. That's what I do. What we all do.
Yeah, that's what I did. But it happens that every day almost. There's so much
every day
writing.
The same link. You just have to put it on your computer or your phone.
The other trick. There's another trick. If you go on WhatsApp in our
group, is that a trick? Okay.
Well, you go to the name of the WhatsApp. I have to thank Elisheva for this. You go to the name of the WhatsApp group for our group, whatever we call Samach Vav, whatever we call ourselves.
You can search.
If you click on the name Samach Vav with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, it opens up like metadata, like what's the nature of this group, and it's like a commentary. In the commentary, you'll see the website samachvav.com and the Zoom link. So what you can do there is you just have to press the link. If you go to the Samach Vav group and you press the Zoom link there, you're done. But anyways, thanks to Elisheva for that suggestion. But Blineder, I will still post it as much as I can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. So we'll stop here. We basically top of page 29. And we're into this talking about the kuvul of Atzilus, of Kalim of Atzilus. We'll talk about the and yes, we'll bring it all back to mitzvah soon. I believe that will start the next page somewhere. Yeah. Okay. So we'll stop here. Let me stop the recording.